Imagine living in a town where families have lived for generations. Schools are full of children, church bells ring every Sunday, and neighbors know each other by name. Now imagine waking up one day to discover that your town will soon disappear. Not slowly, not naturally, but deliberately. Homes demolished, roads erased, and within a few years, your entire community no longer exists on the map. This may sound like a dystopian movie plot, but it actually happened across the United States. Throughout American history, entire towns and communities have been intentionally erased from maps. Sometimes for dams, sometimes for military projects, sometimes for urban development, and sometimes for reasons far more controversial. Today, we're uncovering why entire American communities vanished and the hidden stories behind the towns that disappeared forever. Part 1. The towns that drowned. One of the most common reasons communities disappeared was the construction of massive dams and reservoirs. In the early 20th century, America was rapidly expanding its infrastructure. Cities needed electricity, flood control, and drinking water. The solution? Build huge dams across major rivers. But when a dam is built, something else happens. Water rises. And sometimes, entire towns lie directly in the path of that rising water. One of the most famous examples is the town of St. Thomas, Nevada. Founded in the 1860s, St. Thomas was a thriving farming community. Families lived there for generations. But in the 1930s, when the Hoover Dam was constructed, the rising waters of Lake Mead slowly swallowed the town. Residents were forced to leave their homes. Buildings were abandoned. Eventually, St. Thomas disappeared completely beneath the water. For decades, the town was lost beneath Lake Mead until a historic drought caused the water to recede, revealing the haunting remains of the town once again. Streets, walls, and foundations, frozen in time. A ghost town that literally rose from the water. And St. Thomas was not alone. Across the United States, dozens of towns were intentionally flooded to create reservoirs. Entire communities sacrificed for the greater good. Part 2. The towns cleared for the military. Not all towns disappeared underwater. Some were erased for something even more secretive: military projects. During World War II and the Cold War, the US government urgently needed land for training grounds, weapons testing, and research facilities. Sometimes that land already had people living on it. One powerful example is Arlington, Tennessee's neighboring community called Pocahontas Training Grounds. In the 1940s, the US military began acquiring land across the country to build massive training areas. Entire rural communities were forced to relocate. But one of the most dramatic cases happened in Nevada. In 1951, the government created the Nevada Test Site to conduct nuclear weapons tests. Several small desert communities nearby were forced to evacuate permanently. Within years, homes were bulldozed and the towns vanished. Above-ground nuclear explosions would soon shake the desert landscape. Residents who once farmed and raised families there were gone forever. Their towns erased not by water, but by secrecy and national security. Part 3. Urban renewal and controversial displacement. Perhaps the most controversial reason towns disappeared was something called urban renewal. In the mid-20th century, American cities launched massive redevelopment projects. The goal was to modernize cities by replacing older neighborhoods with highways, offices, and modern buildings. But many of these projects targeted working-class communities and minority neighborhoods. Entire neighborhoods were labeled blighted, even when they were vibrant communities. One of the most famous examples is Seneca Village in New York City. In the 1800s, Seneca Village was a thriving community of African-American landowners, immigrants, and working families. But in the 1850s, the city decided to build something new: Central Park. Using eminent domain, officials forced residents to leave. Homes were demolished, churches destroyed. Within a few years, the entire village was gone. Today, millions of visitors walk through Central Park, never realizing a community once stood there. Similar stories played out in cities across America. Neighborhoods vanished to make room for highways, stadiums, and skyscrapers. For many families, these changes meant losing not just homes, but entire cultural communities. Part 4. Natural disasters that finished the job. Some towns were erased for another reason entirely: disaster. Floods, fires, and earthquakes have destroyed countless communities throughout American history. Sometimes towns were rebuilt. but other times they were simply abandoned. One example is Centralia, Pennsylvania. In 1962, a coal mine fire accidentally started beneath the town. The fire spread underground through abandoned coal tunnels, and it never stopped. Even today, more than 60 years later, the fire is still burning beneath the ground. Toxic gases began rising through the streets. Sinkholes opened suddenly. The government eventually evacuated most of the town. Today, Centralia is almost completely abandoned. A once living town turned into one of America's most famous ghost towns. Part 5. When maps rewrite history. When towns disappear, something else happens too. Maps change. New roads appear. Lakes replace farmland. Cities expand over old neighborhoods. And over time, the original communities fade from memory. Future generations grow up never knowing those towns existed. But history leaves traces. Old photographs, foundation stones, street grids hidden in forests, sometimes even entire ghost towns waiting to be rediscovered. Across America, thousands of forgotten communities once thrived where highways, lakes, and cities now stand. Their stories remind us that maps don't just show geography. They show power, progress, and the difficult choices societies make about land and people. So next time you look at a map of the United States, remember something surprising. Some of the empty spaces, some of the lakes, some of the parks were once living communities, homes, schools, churches, places where people built lives, until history erased them. And who knows, some of those lost towns may still be out there, waiting to be discovered again. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden stories from American history. Because sometimes, the most fascinating parts of history are the places that disappear.